Hi, Jody Hardesty with Empowered Heart Connections. One topic that comes up in many relationships with couples in particular, and it can be helpful to address this issue from the very beginning of a relationship to curb some potential issues down the line, is trust. Most of us have been hurt by someone at some point in our lives and may have developed some insecurities around that. It may have been infidelity, as we've touched on before, but it also could just be that someone really has never felt secure in relationships. And they need to develop a sense of trust and connection with their partners in order to develop that, in order to create a sense of trust and safety. And it doesn't happen overnight, and sometimes it can be a real bone of contention for couples, especially if maybe one partner is worried about the other person either cheating or betraying them or being dishonest with them in some way, and then they're kind of preemptively accusing the other person, and it ends up in this kind of defend and attack argument rather than what it could be is an actual reparative healing process in relationships. But most of us are not, as I've mentioned many times before, are not trained to say, hey, I feel upset about this, I would like to talk about this. Most of us are kind of reactive. We wait until we get to the point where we're just so frustrated and upset or hurt or scared or insecure that we end up lashing out, or we end up saying things in less than helpful way with using you statements and attacking someone, and which makes it really difficult for our partners or whoever we're dating to go, I hear you, you're feeling stressed out or insecure right now. So this can be a real deal breaker in relationships, is if these conflicts keep happening. It's kind of like this cycle that it's not the couple, it's not the people. Most people have really good qualities and they're compassionate and kind and loving in many ways, but it's this conflict cycle that gets kind of hardwired, and then it's really difficult to unhook from the conflict. So, and again, I know it's really, really difficult whenever someone is coming at you as that what feels like an attack, but when we can break it down to what the underlying feeling or fear is, it can be much more manageable. So say, for example, somebody comes home late and maybe somebody's insecure and they're like, well, why were you home late? You didn't call me and tell me that you were going to be late, and is there something going on that I don't know about? Right? All of these insecurities and these questions that our lovely brains like to plant in our heads is, well, okay, what if, right? If we don't have answers to something, then we're really good at telling a story to ourselves about what might be happening, right? My partner came home late. Oh, maybe there's something wrong. Or even if they're not home yet, like maybe they're dead on the side of the road somewhere, and maybe something terrible has happened, or maybe they're going to leave me, or there's so many stories that many of us struggle with telling ourselves. And although it could be just nothing, it could just be maybe your phone's not working, or maybe they just didn't think to call. They weren't thinking that you were going to be as worried as you were, and so it was not really a big deal, but it's already become a big deal in our minds. So when they get home, we're like, well, where were you? What were you doing? What's happening? And then they're kind of barraged with all of these accusations and attacks, and they just maybe, got stuck on the side of the road somewhere in traffic, or maybe they had a flat tire, or maybe they're just running slow. So there's the story that we have to contend with when we're feeling insecure or fearful about something, and our fears and our insecurities can make life much more challenging. I know I've had to fight my own little stories in my head as well. It's hard not to draw conclusions that may not be so helpful, no matter what the situation is. So the first step is to be aware of, okay, what are those stories that I tend to tell myself Is it about insecurity? Is it about fear? Is it, do I not feel I'm enough for my partner? Is that what I'm struggling with? And if you can get to that bottom line, if you can really do some soul searching and digging to really evaluate is, what is it that's triggering this insecurity in me? And often it has nothing to do with our partners. It just has to do with our own insecurities, our own past, our own stressors, our own wild stories we tend to tell ourselves in our head. And it can be real challenging to unravel that. But if you can get to the bottom of that and you can have a conversation with your partner about this, it can really prevent some really unpleasant conversations from ensuing. So if he gets home and he forgets to call you because he knows and you've had this conversation, or you've had this conversation that, hey, my brain tends to tell me wild stories when you don't call me when you're running late, so I would really like it if you could help me out with that and just send me a text or give me a call and let me know that you're alive and that everything's okay and that I don't have to worry. That would be super awesome. And then if they don't do that and they come home, then they can kind of anticipate that, my partner's probably not going to be real thrilled with me that I came home way later than I said I was going to, and I didn't let them know, and they were really worried. So you can kind of be prepared that perhaps those stories got pretty big while I was not being considerate of your feelings and letting you know that I was going to be late. And so you can kind of prepare for approaching it in a more gentle way. So you come home late, your partner's already talked to you about how that's really stressful for them and that they really would like you to, just reach out and let them know that everything's okay if you're going to be later than you anticipate. And you still didn't call them, and you get home and you kind of anticipate that they're going to be maybe not so happy with you. So sometimes people get defensive right from the get-go. Like, I'm not doing anything wrong. I don't know why you don't trust me. You just are crazy, or whatever the term they decide to come up with is. And then the other partner who's already insecure is like, oh my goodness, my stories I'm telling myself are true, and he really is. Look how defensive he's acting. He must be guilty, or she. And it just gets bigger and bigger and bigger, and it doesn't usually resolve well in those moments. We get into that animal side of our brain that just is not helpful at all. It's really meant for survival, not for communication. So that is the scenario that does not work out so great. So say the other option is you're running late and you just don't get a chance to call, or maybe you forgot, or maybe you just didn't think it was important, and you get home and your partner's irritated with you and they're like, you don't have any respect for me, you didn't call me, you were, which is never fun to hear and not a good way to communicate. But say they do that, can you be the bigger person in that moment and go, I understand that you're upset. I didn't intend to hurt your feelings. I didn't intend to make you worry. I apologize for not calling. I know you appreciate that. And then things often de-escalate pretty quickly, rather than the other alternative is, you don't trust me, right? Like I talked about before. You don't trust me. I have to be supervised by you. You control me. Whatever you back. Always not helpful. Is if somebody can be the bigger person in those moments and just have a loving, tender response, even if someone did not handle it well. Because we're human. And although it's important for both people to work on presenting information in an easy-to-digest format, we're all human, so sometimes we do it badly. Sometimes we get our insecurities get the best of us, and the quickest way to de-escalate that and the quickest way to repair and build trust is to acknowledge the disconnect, right? I get it. I know you have a hard time with it whenever I'm really late and I don't call you and I don't let you know, and I'm sorry. It was inconsiderate of me to not reach out, and I know that troubles you, and I'm sorry about that, right? I'm sorry. Can we connect? A whole lot different than defending yourself and attacking, which is what most of us have the tendency to do. So I know this is easier said than done, but it takes a lot of practice. And it also takes, again, the person who's struggling with the insecurity to really do some work themselves, because you can't rely on your partner to carry all of that. Is if you can understand that, hey, I know this is a hot button issue for me, and when they come in late, if you can not come at them with guns blazing, that's a whole lot easier to respond to. Is, I really am frustrated because this is an issue for me, and I really struggle with this, and I really need your help with this. And it's hard that I've told you this and I've asked you this, and you still didn't call me and you didn't connect with me when you were going to be late. So I would really appreciate it if you could be aware of that and work on that. It's really hard for me. And the more you're able to address these things in a loving way, first of all, something magical happens. Is your insecurity goes down a bit, and your defensiveness goes down a bit, because you're learning how to feel safe in a relationship. You're learning how to express your needs in a way that feels good, that you can be heard and held and loved. It's really challenging, but it's so important and so doable over time. It takes practice, and it takes couples, again, taking turns at being the bigger person, which is really hard to do. So especially if there has been a betrayal in the past, as I've talked about in other videos, it's particularly important to bring the humility way down. But even if there hasn't been a betrayal, and one of the people has an insecurity, it's still important to make sure that you are connecting, because you're trying to get what you want out of this relationship. And nobody wants to argue and fight. That's never really a great feeling for anybody. But if you can be the bigger person in that moment, you'll get what you want, less conflict. The other part of that is maybe you've done nothing wrong, but you don't want conflict, so you maybe tell a white lie here and there, and then your partner finds out and they're already insecure, and then they have a reason to have a bigger story in their head that you were dishonest about something, so clearly there's something going on, right? And really, a lot of the time I see this happening is you didn't really do anything wrong, but you omitted information, or you didn't really disclose something all the way because you thought it wasn't really a big deal, and then they find out and you omit or you lie about it, and then the story continues, and it creates more distrust when there really is no need for it. So to really be careful with being open and honest with each other, especially when you have insecurities or when you're doing something that your partner's going to feel triggered by. Is, I know nobody wants conflict, but I can promise you there will be far more conflict if you don't tell someone a minor detail and omit it and lie about it, and they find out later. Then it's a way bigger issue. And they don't really ever know what the real story was, because we're not totally 100% honest with it. So these are areas that can prevent trust from really deteriorating in relationships, and ways that you can find to connect with each other beyond those insecurities, beyond the fear of having conflict, that it's much easier to get over an uncomfortable choice that you made and be upfront about it, rather than having your partner find out later. Even if it wasn't like a big deal, but something you just knew your partner probably wouldn't be a big fan of. Like maybe you guys share a budget and you bought something that they wouldn't really be thrilled about because you guys are trying to save money, and it's not really a big deal in the grand scheme of things, but when you hide it, it becomes a big deal. Because then they wonder, well, what else are they hiding from me? What other secrets are they keeping from me? So it's important to, again, do some soul searching. What is it that I'm insecure about? Am I insecure about having conflict? Am I concerned about that? Am I doing things to avoid conflict that might promote my partner's insecurity? Is my insecurity promoting my partner's defensiveness? And can I find a way to approach things in a more productive way so that we don't have to have as much conflict, and we can hear each other, validate each other, and do that essential bonding thing of feeling safe and connected and supported in a relationship, which is so important. Those are the moments that help you either grow together or grow apart. And that's what it's about. And you're probably going to be in a relationship or find someone who probably triggers you in some area. And I don't know what the purpose of that is, if it's just a funny cosmic joke. But it seems to me that when these people do the work, when even if you are kind of in different places, or if your issue triggers your partner's issue, there's a lot of possibility for growth for that. So and I encourage y'all to not give up and give things a chance. Give it some soul searching and some self-awareness to really try and soften and be the bigger person in those moments, even when it's really hard to do that. Even when your partner makes it really hard. I know all of us do. I know I have too. It's hard whenever we're tender human beings. We all are. So just to be aware of that, I think it can be really helpful in repairing trust and helping each other with insecurity and with conflict avoidance. I hope this has been helpful. Thank you for watching. I hope all is well.